Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Sabina Ejaz. Welcome to Setting the Foundation for Good Relations in Our Homeland, a webinar by Indigenous knowledge keepers addressing racism in healthcare. My colleague, Associate Deputy Minister of Indigenous Services Canada, Valerie Gideon, and I are very happy to welcome you here today on behalf of the knowledge keepers at Turtle Lodge, Central House of Knowledge. I know we are both very honored to have been invited by the knowledge keepers at the Turtle Lodge to be the moderators of this significant, historic, and important session today, where we hear directly from the Indigenous leaders and knowledge holders who have traditionally offered guidance and direction within Indigenous families, communities, and nations for tens of thousands of years. Invited by the Government of Canada, the knowledge keepers come forward today as free and independent thinkers to share their knowledge and guidance that can help glue this country back together, as together we are challenged by issues such as racism, climate change, violence, mental illness, and addiction. Having sat in ceremony for many years, I know that is the place where everything begins from, as we humble ourselves to the higher power of spirit that directs our lives. Ceremony, when conducted in the sacred lodges with the sacred bundles, is an experience like no other that can only be felt and experienced to be understood as the spirit touches and lifts the heart. Today, we humbly ask Grandmother Katherine Whitecloud of the Dakota Nation to lead us with an opening prayer.
Good afternoon. It's my honor and my humble privilege to share with you the prayer that I offered this morning, rather than to offer a prayer here. As we begin each day in prayer, and as we begin each day asking for the guidance from our grandfather, our creator, and our ancestors. So I would like to share with you what I prayed for this morning. I offered up our tobacco, our water, our wasna, our wamnaiza, and our fruit, our berries, to our Creator and to our ancestors who have gone on before us. I humbly ask that there be understanding as we engage in this conversation today. Understanding so that the perpetuation of subjugation does not continue and will not impact our children and our grandchildren. I ask for hearts and minds to be opened, to understand we are all one in the eyes of our Creator, that we all are here to fulfill our responsibilities for which we are blessed with the gift of life and placed here on earth. Our ancestors have guided us forever. Their presence is palpable, their direction is clear, and our direction is to speak the truth. I gave thanks for the gift of life today, for the gift of our children and our grandchildren, and for all that has been provided to us to live a good life, to be healthy, and to do the will of our Creator. Wopiraya mitakayawas. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tumi, Grandmother Katherine Whitecloud. As we move into a new year with new beginnings, this is a perfect time to hear the voice of the Indigenous knowledge keepers. As those who have traditionally offered guidance in Indigenous nations, the knowledge keepers always bring a message of love, hope, and unity for all in the country. Before we begin to introduce the knowledge keepers, I would like to introduce my colleague and co-moderator of this session, Dr. Valerie Gideon. Dr. Gideon is a member of the Mi'kmaq Nation, as well as being the Associate Deputy Minister of Indigenous Services Canada. Dr. Gideon and I have seen a lot of each other this past year as we are on weekly meetings with Minister Carolyn Bennett and a national group of Indigenous physicians and physicians working in Indigenous communities and nations. We've been meeting to talk about and advocate for some of the issues being faced on the ground in Indigenous nations, critical health issues including COVID-19, racism, symptoms of colonization, and lack of access to basic needs of survival. We've been advocating for the autonomy and self-determination of Indigenous nations, and a lot of our discussions have related to the need to lift up the Indigenous knowledge keepers, who many of us believe can help lead and guide this country back to wellness. Dr. Valerie Gideon.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by just acknowledging that I'm on the traditional unceded Algonquin territory on quite a beautiful afternoon. I'd like to thank Grandmother White Cloud for her opening prayer, and I want to thank Turtle Lodge and the Knowledge Keepers for the invitation to co-moderate this session this afternoon. It's truly an honor and a privilege for me to do so. As noted by Sabina, I am a member of the Mi'kmaq Nation and I'm at Indigenous Services Canada. I'm also the mother of two beautiful First Nation girls. And I have the privilege of working with Indigenous health professionals, Indigenous advocates, community members, leaders from across the country. I've had many travels to beautiful communities across Turtle Island, and I have really learned a great deal from elders and knowledge keepers throughout my career, including the wisdom of Grandmother White Cloud at one point as well at the Assembly of First Nations. So today is very important for me, and I'm sure for many people that are participating in this webinar, because it brings us at the forefront of a very important conversation, and one that needs to guide us, as Sabina has mentioned, as we embark on a number of very significant initiatives in the coming year or years, including the implementation of legislation on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, including the co-development of distinctions-based Indigenous health legislation, as well as the work that is underway now around anti-Indigenous racism across the Canadian healthcare system, and preventing and eliminating that racism for future generations, as well as the current generation. I would like to acknowledge Joyce's principle as well, which has been shared by the Atikamekw Nation in memory of Joyce Echaquan, who very tragically passed away as a result of instances of systemic racism in the Canadian healthcare system. And so we remember her and her legacy today, and will continue to find ways in which we can honor that legacy in the months and years to come. So with that introduction, I will turn it back over to my colleague, but just prior to doing so, I would like to just confirm a few logistics. Alors, si vous êtes francophone et vous désirez entendre la session en français, vous avez le bouton au bas de votre écran qui vous permet d'utiliser ou sélectionner la langue francophone pour la session d'aujourd'hui. The webinar will be recorded, will be made available by Turtle Lodge, as noted earlier. And the agenda today is really intended for our knowledge keepers, or for knowledge keepers today, to be able to speak to their experience and share their teachings. We will have a question and answer period as well, and we will be moderating that through the chat function in the Zoom link. So Sabina and myself will be taking turns in terms of sharing questions that have been identified through the chat, and we will be inviting knowledge keepers to be able to provide further wisdom to us in terms of answering those, I'm sure will be very meaningful questions. Sabina, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Valerie Gideon. We have some esteemed knowledge keepers with us today, representing a number of Indigenous nations across Turtle Island. Each of the knowledge keepers who will share today is a respected member of the National Turtle Lodge Council of Knowledge Keepers. The knowledge keepers are the true leaders, the elders, and the professors of Indigenous nations and peoples who have spent a lifetime learning and earning the knowledge they carry about their ancestral way of life. Fluent in their original languages, they have learned their teachings from ceremony and from the elders and knowledge keepers of their nations. The knowledge keepers are very kind people who have dedicated their lives to restoring the values and way of life of their ancestors by mentoring the youth and offering guidance to the people. Traditionally, it was the knowledge keepers of Indigenous nations who offered leadership and guidance, following the ceremonial protocols of their people. For the knowledge keepers, it has never been their way as a people to impose, rather to offer guidance, vision, and a spiritual leadership in the spirit of sharing. They wish to come forward, to share their knowledge and strengths that are embedded in their identity as the original peoples of their homeland. For us today, in keeping with Indigenous protocols, free choice is paramount. While the role of the knowledge keepers is to share the spiritual and natural laws that apply universally to each and every one of us, it is always the free choice of the individual to follow the guidance that is provided. I am honored to introduce the first speaker with us today, Hereditary Chief and Knowledge Keeper, Stephen Augustin. From the Mi'kmaq Nation, Knowledge Keeper Augustine is captain on the Mi'kmaq Grand Council. Knowledge Keeper Augustine was trained by the elders from an early age for his role as a hereditary chief. He has a thorough command of traditional practices, his language, and the history of his people. Over the years, he has shared his expertise in Mi'kmaq traditional knowledge and oral history in many national and international venues, including the United Nations, UNESCO, the Vatican, and various federal and provincial departments, universities, and museums. Knowledge Keeper Augustine is a member of the Turtle Lodge National Council of Knowledge Keepers. We look forward to hearing your presentation today.
Thank you, Wellalio. Weldasi, Wigumio, Nigela Giskuka, Miwadam, Dandelia, Agnodmadulti. As Sabina said, I'm a hereditary chief because my ancestor, Michael Augustine, signed a treaty of peace and friendship on March 10, 1760 in Halifax. So hereditary, I say, and we speak about racism today. And I do believe that racism is inherent. It's inherently being passed down by generations of people who have that kind of a mindset. Racism is hereditary. In Europe, there have been attitudes of superiority by certain societies. And we look at the culture and society that came to North America. There was a lot of anguish, a lot of anger, a lot of conflict between French and English cultures. There was also colonization taking place in Ireland and Scotland, Wales. And so when the British arrived in Canada, they had a superior attitude towards Indigenous peoples. And so they saw us in the way in terms of us occupying the land that they had wanted to turn into a property, private property. Resources that come from the lands were becoming under control. And Indigenous people happened to be in the way. And these European societies also had a history of enslaving certain peoples, especially from Africa. And during the conflicts, a lot of the attitudes of superiority and racism were sparked and were committed during heights of anguish and anger and during war against each culture and society. So we have a history of this in North America. The English first arrived here and were at war with the French, and then at some point in time, the French were expelled out of here, about 15 to 18,000 of them, and then the British brothers and sisters south of us entered into an argument, a war, a revolutionary war, and then for about 40,000 were expelled out of the United States and landed into our territory. And so historically, they came and settled among us, hoping to displace the Acadian society and somehow displace the indigenous cultures. And so these kind of attitudes towards the less equal peoples, darker people, blacks in one extreme and brown people in the other extreme, were treated differently. And so in this treatment, the whole ideology of racism started to form. And today I am talking about how are we going to move forward with that kind of a history. And the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, came up with 94 calls to action in terms of reconciling our people to whoever else is here living among us. And one of the initial steps that brought forward the notion of how do we fix things. In British Columbia, Dr. Mary Ellen Turpel was given the task to review what's going on in racism in the healthcare system in British Columbia. And one of the things that I want to share is something that she wrote and presented in the report about racism. Racism is the belief that a group of people are inferior based on the color of their skin or cultural background. This belief drives discriminatory behavior and practices such as negative racial profiling and policies that oppress, ignore, or treat racialized groups as less than non-racialized groups. The result is substantive inequity where members of racialized and culturally distinct peoples, such as Indigenous peoples, do not receive the services they require or to enjoy equitable opportunities or outcomes with other citizens from non-racialized groups. This is systemic racism, wherever acceptance of these discriminatory and prejudicial practices are normalized across our society in public services and institutions. So on that note, I want to end off by saying that our people, we have always recognized our diversity, our different languages among our Indigenous cultural groups. And I think this is something that we should learn from our Indigenous people, is we need to rise above that and treat each other as brothers and sisters of one human family. And I think we need to move forward in friendship by sharing our food, by doing ceremony, engaging in devotion and commitment to one another. And I leave it at that. I hope we all move forward in this direction. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Knowledge Keeper Augustine, for setting a historical context. And also, I always find it so profound that the Knowledge Keepers have a way of showing love in the way he mentioned our British brothers and sisters. You know, they're still a way of expressing that family relationship despite everything that has happened. And you know, he also really gave an example of the history of nations and peoples who have an experience of living together in diversity and showing that respect So I think I just want to say thank you for your remarks. I'm very honored to introduce Mi'kmaq grandmother Jane Meter, who also happens to be my adopted mother, in keeping with ancient traditions of making family. Mi'kmaq grandmother Jane Meter comes from the traditional lands of the Unama'ki that are more commonly known as Cape Breton Island on the east coast of Canada. A mother of 6, a grandmother of 7, and a member of the Turtle Lodge National Council of Knowledge Keepers, Grandmother Jane was raised and lives in the Mi'kmaq community of Member 2. Mi'kmaq is Grandmother Jane's first language, and she is a passionate educator of her language, culture, and heritage, sharing her knowledge and experiences with others in any way that she can. Her long career has included developing, writing, and implementing Mi'kmaq cultural activities and events in many schools and universities throughout Nova Scotia. Grandmother Jane Meter.
Ngwe Bojorani Tanzi Segos Kanagawa. My pleasure. I'm very happy to be here and to be involved in this webinar. And I want to thank you, Sabina and Valerie, for inviting me. What I wanted to talk about was compassion. Compassion and forgiveness, and how important that is in all our relationships, in building a relationship. And I want to begin by compassion. Yeah, the importance of compassion. And compassion is, I want to share a quote with you from one of my students, and I think it's a beautiful quote. She's talking about restorative justice. And she said, restorative justice is based on the understanding of compassion, that no one is alone in society, treating every individual as an equal member of the community. This means to me that everyone has an equal chance to contribute to the greater good of a community. That's by one of my students, Emma Kerr. But I wanted to continue the compassion and what does it entail. And it's about forgiveness. That's the one thing I want to talk about was forgiveness. And as Elder Augustine talked about, about living together peacefully, living together in a good way. And in my language, forgiveness, we say abiksik duahan. But what that means is to bring back the relationship to its pristine state, to its original state. It's about bringing back that relationship. And it began this journey. Well, my parents, my grandparents, they've always taught me about forgiveness, and we always talked about it. But this particular journey where forgiveness made such an impact in my life began with the death of my husband. He was murdered in our community in 1996. And when he died, I hadn't been with him because of alcohol and drug abuse, and I didn't want to bring up my children in that environment. But we hadn't divorced. I still loved him very much, and I was hoping that. And I told him that if you find sobriety, we'll get back together. And he would for a little while, but he'd always go back to that. Anyway, when he died, our youngest daughters were 3 and 5. They were just babies when he passed away. And and the day it happened, it was on a Friday afternoon. And I remember my mom coming into the house, my mother and my aunt, and the women in my family, my sister-in-law, they all came in and sat down at the kitchen table, but nobody said anything. I didn't know anything at the time. And my cousin came in. And when she came in, she said, Jane, she said, I'm so sorry. I have bad news for you. And she told me what had happened. She said there was a murder down the road, and they think it's your husband. They think your husband was killed. And I just started crying. I was so grateful my mother and the women in my family were there. When later I spoke to my mother and asked her, I said, I'm so glad you were there when that happened. She said, we knew about it. She said, I didn't know how to tell you. And anyway, so, after that, I remember telling my daughters, and I remember excusing myself and saying I had to go upstairs to my room. And I went to my room and I prayed. And I prayed for help. I didn't know how to deal with it. I felt anger. I felt hurt. And I didn't know what to do. And so as I was praying, a grandmother came to visit me. She came to see me and she talked about forgiveness. And I asked her, she said, she said, I need to tell you things. She said, in this life, she said, it's always about free choice. It's always about free will. And she said, I want you to understand that forgiveness is important. But she said, yet it's up to you to forgive. She said, you always have a choice. You can choose to forgive or you can choose not to forgive. But she said, I'll tell you what will happen. If you choose not to forgive, if you choose to forgive, she said, your children will grow up healthy and happy and enjoy life, and they'll be empowered. Should you choose not to forgive, what you will do is your children will become angry, bitter adults, always looking for revenge and looking to even the score. She said, it is ultimately it's your choice, but she said, I will tell you this. This man may have taken your children's father's life, but you have the ability and the power to destroy their lives. It's up to you. And I thought about it and I said, I remember my grandmother always talking about forgiveness and how important it was and how it brought peace within you. Because when our people are in the hospital and they're dying, I remember my grandmother always asking my family members, did you go and forgive? Did you go do a forgiveness ceremony while they're in the hospital? Because our people believe that it is important that you ask for forgiveness of that human being that is dying, but that you also give forgiveness so that they don't carry that burden into the spirit world, that you lighten their burden as they go into the spirit world. And so I remember my grandmother always asking that. And And then we also have ceremonies around forgiveness. We have forgiveness ceremonies. Now they do it at New Year and the New Year, but it used to be done around the winter solstice, and it would be done different times of the year, probably in the also in the summer, and people would come and they'd all renew that relationship and renew their friendship with each other. Anyway, the after this, I went to the other family. I went to the house where my husband was killed, and I went to the house, and the house next door, my friend was in the house next door, and my friend it was her brother who did this. And I went in to see her. We also have a close relationship. Not only was she my friend, but she was a godmother to one of my daughters. And I went in and she looked at me. I went into the house next door and she looked at me, and I opened my arms and she came over and she cried on my shoulders, and we cried together. And that was, I guess it was empowering for both of us, you know, and we were also later in the day, later in the, I think probably the following night, I called this man's brother-in-law, the man who killed my husband. I called his brother-in-law and I asked him, I said, how's your family doing? How are your wife, you know, and your in-laws? He said, they're not doing well. They're falling apart. They're having a very difficult time. So I asked him, I said, do you think they would mind if my mother-in-law and I came over there and prayed with them? Do you think it would be okay? And he said, please do that. I think it would be so helpful to them in dealing with what's going on because they're hurting so much. So my mother-in-law and I went over there and we prayed with them. And of course we shared tea with them and talked for a while. But it just seemed like there was so much that was going on, but I took a lot of direction from spirit and from my children. And so the house, the lady that I was talking about, she wanted to clean the house. I said, don't do that, because I know you're just trying to do it as a way of repenting. I said, don't do that. Don't do that. So I asked the band council if they would board up the house after the police tape came down, and if they wouldn't mind. And I said, you know, if I have to, I'll pay. I'll pay for professional cleaners to go in there. And they said, no, it's okay. We'll take care of that. So they were very good about it. Because I didn't want anybody going in there and telling my daughters later, you know, how sometimes people are kind of, I don't know what it is, if they like the gruesome details or whatever, but I didn't want anyone telling my daughters later, here's where the blood was, here's what happened, here's how it looked. And so they were very accommodating. They boarded up the house and they asked professional cleaners to come in, people who did not know my husband or any either family. So they were really good about it. And a couple of days later, we got together with the family and we prayed and we smudged the house. I follow our traditional ways, but the other family followed Roman Catholicism. So we had both. We had the priest come in and bless the house with his like holy water and prayers, and some of the elders doing the rosary. And then we did our smudging and our traditional prayers and offering of tobacco and and song, like we did healing songs, and and it, and then the other family had tea and sweets ready for the community. And I was very fortunate that there were elders from every part of our community that came and participated along with different families, you know, and so it was a lot of healing for all of us at the time. And then I was talking to my daughters, um, and I told them, I asked them, I said, there's a little girl I need to tell you about. I said, she's 7, 8 years old. They were just 3 and 5. And I told them this little girl is having a really difficult time in school. The kids are making fun of her. Um, they're making things very difficult for her. And they're telling her that you're no good. Your father's a murderer. Um, and you're not going to amount to anything. And anyway, so I told my daughters about her. I said, what do you think we should do? And my 3-year-old said, you know what? No, my 5-year-old said, you know what, Mom, we should go visit her. Let's go see her and make sure she's all right and let her know we care. I said, okay. And my 3-year-old said, and we should bring gifts. Let's bring gifts to her. I said, okay. So we went. I called the mother, and the mother said, yes, please. She's having a hard time. She would love to see you guys. So we went to the flower shop just down the road, and my 5-year-old came in with me, and she picked out this little stuffed teddy bear with wings, little gold wings, and a little halo on his head. And then she picked out a gift for her godmother. And then my 3-year-old was in the car with my mother, and you know the students that walk by and buy, they're selling chocolate. Well, she asked my mother to buy a chocolate bar, so my mother did. She bought the little box of chocolates, and so we went to the home. We had our gifts, and my oldest daughter was with me. She's probably 18 or 19 at the time. Anyway, she came with me, and when we came in, the mother greeted us. She was happy to see us. She said, my daughter will be in a few minutes. She's with a friend right now, but she knows you're coming, and she knows who you are. Because one of the things I prayed about was, how do we approach this? Creator, I don't know how to say this without hurting this little girl again, without causing more um, damage, I guess. But it needs to be acknowledged. We can't hide from it, and we can't pretend it didn't happen. So she finally came in, she hugged my daughters, and they gave her these gifts. And as in many Native homes, a lot of times you have your coffee table. Many natives will identify with this. Your coffee table's not usually in front of the couch. Your coffee table is in front of that big picture window. And the kids sat there. She sat in the center, and my daughters, each of them sat on either side of her. And she opened up the chocolate. They were sharing the chocolate, and they were all talking. And I was watching them. The other mother and my daughter and I were sitting and watching them. We're sitting at the kitchen table, like the dining room table, and you can see into the living room. And my 3-year-old, she said, you killed your father killed our dad, didn't he? Your dad killed our dad. And she nodded her head. She said, yeah, he did. And then my 3-year-old said, where's your dad now? And she said, he's in jail. And then they both, I always get emotional about this part. They both leaned into her. And my 3-year-old told her, we know you love your dad just as much as we loved ours. Of course, tears came gushing. And I just found that to be so emotional. And I sat there and I said, thank you, Creator. It was acknowledged, it was said, and it wasn't done in a spiteful or mean or accusatory way. Thank God for those children because they're just so wise and so beautiful. No, and it strengthened that relationship with my daughters. Um, the today she's still very close to my daughters. She's very they're, I guess, best friends. She's good friends with my daughter, and she remembers all that. And I remember one of this man's nieces once telling me, she said, I remember I was about 13, 14 years old when you came to my house after my uncle killed your husband, she said, and you came in to that room and you brought forgiveness and love. She said that was the biggest lesson in my life, and especially at that age, I learned so much from your visit that day, coming to visit my mother and her family. And I think we need to pray together. We need to pray with our ancestors and our families and our children, and we need to teach them about the power of forgiveness, and that forgiveness is not always for the forgiven, but more for the forgiver, you know. And I think in this time too, and the things that we have done as human beings and the mistakes we made, it is vital that we forgive ourselves. And once we can forgive ourselves and forgive, you know, then we can build a really good relationship. We can build lasting friendships. We can build that relationship of family, as Elder Augustine said, with our brothers and our sisters. And it doesn't matter what nation they are from, but that we build that strong relationship and the strong bonds, with strong bonds of love. And I want to thank each and every one of you. Miigwech and Yawa Walalio. And I love all of you. Thank you.
Well, Alan, grandmother Meter, grandmother Jane, that was a beautiful story. And thank you very much for sharing such a personal story to be able to convey the importance of forgiveness and the path that we have before us, especially during such a difficult time right now where people are feeling additional pressures that they've never felt before in the context of this pandemic, but also with everything that we've seen in terms of very, very difficult testimonials right now from Indigenous peoples across the country that are suffering. So, well, Alan, again to you. I now have the privilege of introducing Dakota grandmother Katherine Whitecloud, who is a mother, grandmother, community leader, and knowledge keeper from Sioux Valley, Dakota Nation. Chosen at the age of 16 to represent her people, Grandmother Katherine has been a spokesperson for her nation for over 30 years. Her work lies in ensuring the life and teachings articulated and envisioned by her forefathers is honored and protected. Grandmother Whitecloud is a member of the Turtle Lodge National Council of Knowledge Keepers. Over to you, Grandmother Whitecloud.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gideon, and thank you to my colleagues for their words, for sharing of themselves, and thank you, Grandmother Meter, for that beautiful story, which I've heard before, but each time you tell it and share it, it does touch the spirit and what the essence of our relationships are all about, and how we can learn from our children, and how that understanding that our children are closest to spirit and are not yet tainted by what we impose upon them as adults and society around them. The children are indeed our teachers, and we need to listen to them, from those that are firstborn to those are about age of 10. They are our greatest teachers. We're here today to talk about setting a foundation for relationships, setting a foundation for how we can move forward so that we can respect each other and that we can arrive at solutions together for that topic that is very difficult to speak of. It's very difficult because it has a negative connotation, and that is one of racism in healthcare. We don't need to talk about the reports, although there are many reports already that have outlined and documented the historic relationship with our people and with the governments, as well as with society in general. Those who came from Europe, as was shared by our elder knowledge keeper Augustine, the historical background of those visitors who came to these lands, those visitors who came to exert their power, because that is what they understood and that is their upbringing. But in North America, on these lands that we call Turtle Island, our understanding and our relationship is first and foremost, excuse me, with our Mother, the Earth, our responsibility to care for her. She provides everything for us to be a healthy, well person so that we are able to fulfill our responsibilities that are given to us by our Creator, that we have a role in life to play, that we have responsibilities to fulfill. Our second responsibility is our spiritual responsibility to understand what it is that those gifts are that have been given to us, to understand our role in life, to understand that we have things that we need to do to fulfill in our lifetime so that our children and our grandchildren will not suffer, so that our children and our grandchildren will thrive, so that our Mother, the Earth, continues to thrive and provide for us. That is the essence of being well, is to take care of our Earth, to take care of each other, to build on what has been left for us by our ancestors so that we could have a good life. What's the basis for setting a foundation? If we are to set a foundation, the basis, the first law of a relationship is respect. And respect seems to be where many relationships struggle before they even begin to achieve success. The highest ideal of respect is to give and to share the best of ourselves with each other in service to a greater good, and the essence of respect is to give. Respect cannot be legislated. It can't be forced on people. It is the essential element of every individual character, and by extension, those whom we have contact with and we enter with, engage with, and speak on behalf of. Our relationships, our personal relationships with each other is important. We're not faceless, we're not nameless, and we're not voiceless. We are all here and we will always be here, and we have to acknowledge that. And respect is the basis for the compassion that Grandmother Jane Meter spoke of, and our understanding, our willingness to learn from each other, our willingness to take the best from challenges, to learn the lessons, and to move forward in a good way. Many of us have felt the sting of disrespect. It touches us to the core and it impacts us. Respect is lived and it is breathed in all of our relationships and everything we do every day. It's necessary for the foundation we speak of. Being well in our understanding begins with spiritual well-being. Spiritual well-being connects us to our language, our ways of knowing and doing, our connection to land, the sacredness of water without which none of us would survive, our connection to family, our extended family, our kinship. Our first learning was to be a good relative, to be honorable, to walk with honor and humility, to be respectful, to be kind, to help, and to give. Without spiritual well-being, all other facets of health, our emotional, our mental, our physical well-being will suffer. Health is not only experienced across physical, spiritual, emotional, and mental dimensions, it's also experienced over our lifetime, beginning with gestation and inclusive all stages of our lives. That is why we teach our young girls, be careful how you walk and be careful how you talk while you carry your child in your womb. That is the beginning of how they learn to have a relationship with all that is around them. So how do we set that foundation? Join us in our understanding of what well-being means to us. Through our sacred lodges, we have that knowledge. We have our teachers. We have those who not only practice but live with ceremony, who teach us on a daily basis that we begin our day with prayer and thanksgiving. We didn't wake up this morning because our body told us to. We woke up this morning because the Creator blessed us with the gift of life to wake up and do the best that we can today for what it is that we've been placed here to do. When we are guests in another's home, as our elder grandmother Meter had spoken of, when we are guests in another home, in someone else's home, we respect their home. We bring with us gifts of food and water. We offer our gifts and we humble ourselves. Likewise, when we have guests in our homes, we provide the best for them. We give them our bed. We provide the best meal. We give them everything that we have, as was taught to us by our grandparents, and our parents. We open our home to them. This is the basis of a relationship that we grew up with. And that is the basis that our relationship in Canada started on and was founded on when we welcomed our relatives that came from another country. And that is the relationship that we need to return to. The handshake in our culture is the most important because it accompanies our voice and the words that we speak. It is more powerful than anything written on paper because in our language and in our ways, we do not need to write what it is that we speak of and what it is that we agree to do because our honor is encapsulated in our words, in our action, and in that handshake. We are not people of hierarchy. We view and value all human beings as equal. We were created last, therefore, the ant that crawls on the ground is greater than you and I. It is more powerful. Our mother, the earth, with her provisions of sacred water and all that we need to flourish, is the most sacred of all. She is in control. She is the one who shows us that she is in control. And yet, man and human beings have not yet learned that we are on that precipice of ruining the entire human race. We're not in control. Mother Earth will survive, but the human being will not. The voices of our colleagues and our knowledge keepers share the following. Our grandparents would share, if you want to know where you want to go, you have to understand where you come from to follow the journey the Creator has set for us. That includes everybody that is sharing and listening in. Our colleague Morris Littlewolf stated, "The greatest illness our people have today is that we have become the greatest imitators of another way of life. The way of life that we are to live was given to us by our Creator. That is the sacred way of life. And to imitate another has been to our detriment and has caused the illness that is pervasive amongst our people and amongst yours. The concept of the terms inferior and superior do not exist in our languages and do not reflect our values. We are all equal." As stated by another colleague and another traditional leader, Peter O'Chese, our source for our way of life and our laws is the Creator. It's not written and it is not dictated. In our understanding as a people to be healthy, it requires a spiritual foundation based on identity and connection to the land. This foundation is tied to living our values, reflected in our spiritual and natural laws, our teachings, and following our sacred duties and responsibilities given to us by the Creator. Our Creator has provided everything for us to live a good life, to be healthy, and to fulfill our responsibilities. Our doctor is our Creator and our faith. Our hospital is the land and the water. Our pharmacy is the earth and all that she provides for us. Our ceremonies, our pipe, our rattle, our drum, and our songs were gifted to us for our spiritual, emotional, physical, and psychological well-being. As stated by our young people addressing addictions, the only thing they need is love and kindness. How much does it cost to give a hug? How much does it cost to offer a supportive word or a supportive shoulder? The power of prayer is so great, as was spoken to, but this prayer requires us to do the 50% that's needed with action. You are not here just for yourself. You have a purpose, and what are you going to do to fulfill it? In Wabanug, the resurgence of a people, clearing the path for our survival, voiced and written by our knowledge keepers, there are 25 recommendations and 25 calls to action in Wabanug. I encourage you all to read it, because in that document, which we do not have time to share today with the 10 minutes given to us, and I'm sure I've passed it, I encourage you to read it, to listen and learn for what it is that we are sharing today. So how do we create the spirit of unity? We transcend politics. Politics is not leadership. It's not about parties. It's not about differences. Leadership is about leading with a kind heart and with love for everyone. How do we have a relationship? We have a relationship with our creation, with our Mother Earth, with ourselves, and with others, built upon that foundation of understanding where we all come from and understanding that we are one, all a fabric, a part of the fabric of human being. Our gift is to share our knowledge with all and to respect natural law, that we are all equal and we all have a purpose for the common good, for the well-being of this beautiful earth, so that our children, grandchildren, those yet unborn will have a good life. We share this with you so that we do not need to talk about racism, so that we do not need to talk about all the things that have happened. Those are already in our memories. Those are already in the fabric of who we are. But we take the best of those challenges and learn from them and move it forward so that we can create a good life for our children, our grandchildren, and those yet unborn. Because indeed, that is all our responsibilities, to ensure that they have a good life.
Well, Alan, Grandmother White Cloud, thank you so much for your words with respect to the spirit of unity. And we will make sure that the document that you mentioned will be posted, and there it is. It is actually on the chat. And I remember its reference when we were trying to promote a unified health system in Manitoba specifically, not that long ago. I now have the privilege of introducing Knowledge Keeper, Dr. Dave Crushane, who is a respected elder and knowledge keeper of Anishinaabe people, Niganiagi Inini, leading Earthman, who has devoted his life to sharing Indigenous knowledge, carrying a message of hope, peace, and environmental stewardship. From lighting the sacred fire at the United Nations Earth Summit in 1992 to sharing the stage with spiritual leaders, including the Dalai Lama, Elder Dr. Crushane's leadership has had a global influence. In 2002, he founded the Turtle Lodge International Center for Indigenous Education and Wellness, a sacred lodge recognized internationally and by Indigenous knowledge keepers, as well as the Assembly of First Nations and the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, as one of the most important gathering places for Indigenous peoples in Canada. Knowledge Keeper Dr. Dave Crushane is the chair of the National Turtle Lodge Council of Knowledge Keepers.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Bonjour, Anin, Dine Maganituk, Nigani Aki Inene, Dishnikas, Kinyo, Dotem, Saging Donji, Anishnabin Dao. We are living in an unprecedented time. After much reflection and witnessing what is happening to our world, it has become quite clear that humanity is suffering from the mindset of domination that originated from the idea that we could control and dominate nature. The land is the foundation of life, and it must be treated with absolute respect. To do anything less, we harm not only the earth, but ourselves. Racism, like any other concerning issues, such as climate change, pandemics, violence, insurrection, mental illness, and addiction, is a symptom. The root of our dilemma, which has created these symptoms, is the severing of our relationship with our source of life, the earth. When we lose touch with the earth, we lose our connection to our true spiritual identity and a true understanding of our uniqueness, our purpose as humanity, our original instructions, and our duties and responsibilities. When we go to the root of racism, our solutions lie in reestablishing our sacred connection and relationship with the earth. Our health and well-being as human beings is directly connected to the health and well-being of Mother Earth. We have made the land sick and contaminated our food chain. How we conduct ourselves in relationship to the land and to other members of creation directly affects the balance of life. What we do to the land, we do to ourselves. The earth operates on the principle of balance and natural living laws. When we comply with these natural laws, we can restore the balance of our source of life. When our mother feels well, we as her children will become well again. We need to work on innovative initiatives to addressing the problem of disconnect to the land that are based on sacred values. May I humbly propose we begin by developing an education and implementation process to educate the youth of this country to become stewards of the land. The uniqueness of our approach lies in reconnecting young people with nature and culture as a basis to help change the attitude of dominating the earth to one of respect and compliance with natural laws. The youth need to be encouraged to become unified in taking care of the earth, thus creating the foundation of good relations in our homeland and a new paradigm for the world. Man must be initiated by Mother Earth to feel the kindness that comes from the land and to realize his duties and responsibilities to become true caretakers. We take the youth to the land to learn the ancestral ways of stewardship, which are based on values. It's not just about going to the land, it's about rekindling our spiritual relationship with the land. And in doing so, rekindling the spiritual part of our nature and our true identity as humanity. For us, ceremony is about thanking the spirit and the land and creating sacred relationship. Before we go to the land to engage with and receive from the land, we always do a ceremony of gratitude. Showing gratitude rekindles the spiritual part of our nature. It makes us kind and it makes us humble. When we feel the love of the land, it is this love we naturally share with all. We develop the attitude of working together with the common spirit of loving the land, and then that love can grow and extend to humanity itself. It is the leadership of our knowledge keepers who know the land that would make our initiative unique in keeping with our traditions of elder leadership. This concept has to be developed in a comprehensive way as a concerted effort. It is through the knowledge keepers' guidance, teachings, and the ceremonies that they conduct that the youth can be supported in knowing the land and feeling the land. We need to revolutionize our education system by calling upon the knowledge keepers to create the foundation of an earth-based education, complete with the teachings and ancient approaches of connecting to the land, such as rites of passage. Learning to read the book of nature gives our youth the best chance of surviving with a knowledge of how we can live following the laws of nature. We have used science and technology to create our present world, yet without a foundation of values. Now, let us ground this knowledge with the wisdom and intelligence of the land to develop a stewardship program second to none. We have to work together. There is no one panacea to solve all problems. Nature operates on the principle of balance and oneness. Nature shows us it's the principle of working together with diverse approaches based on sacred values and natural laws that keeps the balance. Let the land, which is full of the spirit of life, be our connection and the foundation of our new world. Let us be guided by the laws of nature. Reconnecting to the land in a spiritual way is the most important step that cannot be bypassed any longer. The land can provide us direction in how to live in a sustainable and respectful way. The land has intelligence and a heart of kindness, and her laws that must be learned and understood. Sacred relationship and communication with the land will provide the ultimate solutions to our current crisis. By being on the land, the youth will begin to hear the voice of the land. The youth must be given maximum support to become true caretakers of the land and human beings of peace, as guided by our knowledge keepers. Maximum investment must be made in developing this concept and supporting this initiative of true stewardship that will have a long-term benefit. Places of education led by Indigenous knowledge keepers who carry the knowledge of the laws of the land and rules of conduct should be recognized, established, and supported with proper investment. The same way that other educational institutions, such as the university and public school systems, have received full investment. This is how we begin to change the negative narrative in this country. Begin with the youth, who will grow to understand our connection to the earth that will unify us as humanity. They will quickly realize we are all related and connected in humanity, working together with one heart to ensure our responsibility to take care of Mother Earth. A national education campaign should be launched where Indigenous peoples share their knowledge of our relationship that has sustained us for tens of thousands of years. We want to come forward to share that knowledge and our strengths that are embedded in our identity as the original peoples of our homeland. We will not impose, but rather offer a spirit of sharing. Our best hope for a more peaceful world rests in the hands of our youth. Give them a chance to be the leaders that they can be, to be guided by the mother of all mothers, Mother Earth, and she will never betray her children. A new world will grow that collectively we envision. Rediscovering our identity as unique members of the human family is fundamental. We all have gifts to share and a unique identity that was given to us. Complete with original instructions on how to take care of each other and how to take care of our home, Mother Earth. It is the land itself that is the source of the solutions to the spiritual identity crisis and the symptoms we are facing. The land can revive our individual identity. We start to feel, we hear the voice of the land, to become inspired and to dream. True humanity is built on values that stem from the heart, to be kind, to be humble, to show respect, and to love all of creation. When we begin by reestablishing our relationship with the earth, we will find our way out of this world that is not sustainable. We will achieve justice and oneness, knowing we are all brothers and sisters united by the heart. Miigwech. Thank you.
Just wait. Thank you so much, Elder Crushane, for that profound teaching you shared with us and a solution for and a way forward based on reconnecting to the earth and helping our youth to do that, you know, from wherever we come from. There have been a lot of profound teachings shared so far today, and I've learned over the years that often the knowledge keepers will address a question indirectly, and it requires active listening from the heart in order to really capture the meaning and the teachings that are being shared. And sometimes that meaning could be different for different people, and you might catch a teaching that is meant for you and for what you're going through in your own life. And so that's part of, when we engage with the knowledge keepers, to really open our hearts to feel, what the teachings are. And there's been so much so far that's been shared. I also find that the knowledge keepers have a way of speaking that inspires rather than judges. And it was mentioned by Grandmother White Cloud that respect or morality cannot be legislated. It's I think that's so profound, because sometimes when we focus on the negative or the racism, for example, it can alienate or cause those who really need to hear those truths to become defensive. And so I find that the way that the knowledge keepers share is so much more effective and inspiring. We're going to be heading now into our question and answer time. So please feel free to ask your questions in the chat. There are already a few here. And we have Jamie Lee Volts with us today, who's going to help Valerie and myself to navigate through this. So we're going to be alternating with the questions and asking the knowledge keepers in general. We'll leave it open to whoever feels compelled to share, to offer your answer. And if there are any specific questions provided to a specific knowledge keeper, please let us know in your question who you're asking that question of, if that's what you would prefer. Of course, we're not able to answer all the questions today, but we will keep track of them and make a plan going forward, hopefully, how to address some of these questions that you may have. So this is a great opportunity. I hope you all will make use of that today. Okay, I'm just receiving the first question here. This question, I hope you don't mind, Keith. This is from Keith Smith. I'm going to read your question. My question is regarding forgiveness. This I agree with, but how does one seek forgiveness and give forgiveness to an institution? Individual healthcare workers are easy because I sit with them and talk, cry, laugh, and other healing actions. But this does not happen with institutions. This, as I see it, is one of the easiest ways of deflecting a person's biases and racism by laying it at the feet of the institution. Would anyone like to offer a response from the knowledge keepers? Knowledge keeper Augustine.
Yes, I think I in the rush to kind of close off my presentation at the beginning part, I was kind of strictly sticking to that 10-minute opportunity. But I think education, I mean, the offer of education, the offer of educating, the offer of the need to overhaul the whole education system, I think is the key to address the institutional, organizational context of it all, because it's in the leadership, whether it's the president or prime minister or premier or whoever is in the lead, it's incumbent upon them to instruct or direct this responsibility of giving voice to people who want to offer apologies or offer solutions for our future. And I think that's the way to go forward, is to offer it as a package of education, cross-cultural information, cross-cultural education for everybody, because I think we need to know where we all came from. We need to know our history, our collective history. We experienced it together as victors, as losers, or colonized or colonizers. And so I think it's important for us to offer an opportunity of openness, that we open the door and say, here we are, we want to accept your apology, or hear us out. We want to offer this as a solution to our collective problem. Okay.
I just wanted to add something to what Stephen was saying. But one of the things with forgiveness and what we've been taught is there's restitution with forgiveness. There's always restitution. It's not because you forgive someone, it doesn't mean a free pass. It means there needs to be restitution. And that's why, like I said, in our language, it means bringing that relationship back to a pristine state. And as Elder Augustine said, it's about teaching, and it's about informing, and it's about educating others and giving them the opportunity to bring about that restitution, to bring about a way of changing, I guess, their attitudes. And just kind of for the record, the man that I was talking about, we often prayed for him, my children and I, and he's doing very well. And he's, he did his time in prison, but he's doing well for himself now, which we're really happy to hear.
So Grandmother Meter, the next question actually does connect very much to what you've just spoken to. The next question is, I'm wondering if you might have any tips on forgiving oneself.
The question, I'm just going to repeat it. The volume wasn't coming through, Val. It was on the issue of forgiveness and asking Grandmother Jane Meter if you could share, if you have any tips on how to forgive oneself, for Grandmother Jane Meter and any of the knowledge keepers who also want to respond.
I think it comes about understanding, and to me, that forgiveness comes from our traditional teachings, and from, when we talk about, Grandmother Katherine talked about getting up in the day, and one of the teachings that I was always told was, when that sun comes up over that horizon, that grandfather comes up over the horizon, it's Creator's way, it's the cosmos, I guess, way of forgiving us, giving us a new day, giving us a new beginning, giving us a new start, so that anything that we have done, it's wiped clean, and we're given another chance. We're given a second chance or third chance to renew those relationships, and to change our way, and the way we think, and the way we act. And no, it's not always easy, but it takes time, but to have it in the forefront of your mind always, that I am loved, I am loving, and I am cared for. And I think that those are little ways. And the other thing That's so important. Act as if you've already forgiven yourself. Don't hold on to that stuff. Once you've passed it over to Creator, once you've passed it over to those powers, don't take it back. Just let it go. And we have ceremonies for that too.
Did anyone else want to respond to that question? I can really relate to what Grandmother Meader just shared. I personally learned and experienced that ceremony of putting a glass of water at my eastern window in the morning. And I went through this for 11 years to try to make a full year without missing a day. But it took me 11 years to do it. But it really is profound, and to help build spiritual identity and strength. I'm going to share the next question here. We have little children. We want to homeschool to avoid the educational system. What we would like to have is some guidance on how to grow them in spiritual connection with the earth. Any chance that you could come up with some key points and some practical help or guidance?
You know, I really appreciate the question that's being asked. And I think, first of all, I want to acknowledge, you know, the individual that is going to take the responsibility of homeschooling their child. Because I think that's one of the first challenges that we have, is to reconnect the children to the home, and certainly to the mothers. You know, we do have a law as an Anishinaabe people, which is referred to as the grandmother's law. And that grandmother's law has always been the supreme guidance of how we are to live and behave as human beings. You know, when we talk about educating our children, and of course, that education, you know, should be directly connected to the land itself. And rather than having a curriculum, you know, for the young people, what is most important is to take them to the land and allow them to ask the questions, you know, freely from what they are feeling. And the questions will be many. You don't need to write a curriculum for them, because what you want them to do is you want them to learn from the questions that they're asking. What is most important right now for the young people is to take them to the land. And that would be the beginning of supporting the uniqueness of their own spiritual identity, because it's what the challenge is, like I've said earlier, you know, is how do we become kind, caring, you know, human beings. And it's been my experience in working with many, many young people that when we're on the land with them, is when you really feel that spirit that cannot be intellectualized. You cannot intellectualize spirit. It's something you have to feel. And the important thing is to offer support for the children, whether it be in our own individual homes, and whether we gather collectively to create more opportunities of support for the young people to be on the land. So what I would suggest, you know, to the individual that has raised the question, you know, is that first of all, feel good within yourself that you have that kind of motivation, you know, to homeschool your children. I know as a father, you know, I took, you know, my children out of the educational institutions. And it was my partner that really took the key role in educating my children and grandchildren. And I'm very, very proud that that they talk about those values of showing kindness and respect for everyone. That's the most important thing we can teach our children, is how to love and how to show respect and how to be able to give, because that's one of the biggest secrets to life, is to be able to give. And when we're encouraged, to tell our children never to be stingy, never to, to ever be at that level that you're not able to give and to share. And it is in this spirit today that ones like ourselves that have been given this recognition, to be the knowledge keepers of our people, we know that the role that we have is to be able to serve the will of the great power of the great love of the Creator, that we become instruments of that. And the parents have duties and responsibilities, and sacred duties and responsibilities, to be able to teach the children about the most valuable things that they need to hear. Because once you're able to have the essence of spirit of giving and sharing, you become a magnet to the universe, that you will draw abundance into your life. Because that's the way that the power of the universe operates, is through that essence of the spirit of love and kindness and being able to share. So I would just continue, I would just encourage that individual, that there will be help, for you, to ensure that you're able to fill your sacred duty as a parent to teach your children.
Thank you very much for that response. The next question talks about systemic racism. How do we ensure that racism is addressed in healthcare at all levels? How do we influence systemic change in colleges, universities who are educating the next generation of healthcare professionals, in administration in our healthcare systems, accountability and tools to address racism on frontline service delivery? And I also want to note that it's similar to another question we received that asked about advice specifically to the Indigenous Physicians Association of Canada, that are really working to reform the medical education system in Canada. So it connects to this question as well. I'm not sure who would like to try to take that on. Elder Augustine?
Yes, I'm a new member of the Nova Scotia Health. They dropped the word authority. Nova Scotia Health, it's called. And one of the first things I did was to do a cross-cultural education session. And partly the organization itself has incorporated within its strategic management plan the concept of indigenization and providing learning opportunities for all the health directors and eventually all to all the health providers across the province. And in British Columbia, they incorporated the UNDRIP. They legislated it as a provincial priority. The United Nations, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And in there, it provides the opportunities to engage in those anti-racism kind of concepts and ideas and programs to help initiate understanding and learning and knowledge about the issue. And it's only this way that we'll be able to help prepare the next generation of people that are coming into existence, because it's hard to change overnight. And like Elder Whitecloud said, you can't legislate attitude, and it has to come at a base level of education for the young people, and as they grow older, into high school and into university education. And that's the only way we're going to be able to battle that whole issue of racism in every service, whether it's health or education.
Is there anyone else that also wanted to touch on this question? Oh, Grandmother Whitecloud.
Hey, lengthy question. I'm attempting to read them here on the screen, and to provide a sense of what could be done. I'm aware that through the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations, as well as other recommendations, that there are various institutions across the country that have committed to creating a process for addressing the recommendations, especially when it comes to educational institutions. Um, there's a joint committee that was created to action the concerns raised on Indigenous health through the it's called Medical Facilities of Canada. For those that are asking that question, there's been a plan put forward for introducing and training Indigenous students who want to go into the medical field, whether it be nurses, physicians, or technicians, and a means of introducing that. That's been a commitment made. I'm aware of. I've read about it. I'm also aware, specifically in Manitoba, that the post-secondary institutions, all of them have committed to an action plan for addressing the recommendations in the TRC report, the Truth and Reconciliation report. So there are those who are committed, who have made commitments. Now the challenge is to follow up with action. That has always been the challenge. When we go back to all the other reports that have been done, they are there on public record for everybody to read, to gain an understanding of what we're talking about, and to gain an understanding of why there is always question on our part about commitments from governments or institutions that they're going to address these things, because the earliest reports that have been done, that have been commissioned by governments, have never been addressed or have been only partially addressed. You go back to RCAP, 4,000 pages, and all the recommendations that came out of that, and it sits on a shelf somewhere, all of it. We're hoping that the recommendations that came out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission won't sit somewhere and not be addressed, because it impacts everybody. And the reason why we are having this conversation today is because those recommendations, but not only that, the experiences that have been shared by our people through all from residential school on out forward to today, including Jordan's principle, including Joyce's principle, including all the other reports, have identified what needs to be done, not only by government, but by society and by individuals, by each one of us, to ensure that we all live together in a good way, that we all have an opportunity to be the best that we can be, and especially that our children can be the best that they possibly can be. We have a responsibility individually to ensure that those recommendations and the commitments made by these institutions and by governments and by individuals are kept and are met. Because it's like what I said before, if you cannot honor your word, what can you honor? And it's a reflection on the individual. And that concept has been lost. Words come very cheaply these days. There is no value to them. Just as paper that the words are written on can be torn and trashed. But your honor is something that you walk with for your lifetime. Your words are something that are a reflection of you, the individual, and those you purport to represent for the rest of your life. And that's important to remember. So for those that are posing those questions about what's available, I encourage you to hold those accountable who have put forward these plans and these recommendations for how they want to address racism in healthcare. Because if you go online and put that in Google or in any search engine, you're going to have at least 50 reports, if not more, that come up that identifies what needs to be done. So I encourage you to read those. But I ask you also to to read documents that have been prepared and the words of our knowledge keepers and our ancestors. It's historical. Those words come from ancestors from time immemorial that have carried us to this day. So we share those with you, and I encourage you to follow them. Popida, mitakewas.
Thank you, Grandmother White Cloud. The next question is from Ron Jansen from the Interlake Eastern Regional Health Authority. I believe he's the CEO. What are some practical recommendations for how healthcare providers can partner with local First Nations in addressing systemic racism in their healthcare service delivery? Do you have some successful examples of this? And I'm going to pass this question on to Elder Krishna.
Thank you very much for that question, Ron. You know, in reflecting on his question as to, you know, how can we ensure, you know, that there be a stronger voice, you know, for the First Peoples. And I think one of the challenges we have to overcome is the marginalization of a people, that we're not necessarily a part of the decision-making processes that decide, you know, for us, what is good for us. What I'm very proud to, you know, to say that here in our area, in our region, you know, we were able to develop a partnership with the local regional authority, you know, and it took a lot of work. It took a lot of sharing, sometimes crying, but, you know, we persevered in terms of, you know, ensuring that we would have equal participation in the process of the local hospital. And in that understanding of equal participation is recognizing that we have to establish partnerships. And we were very fortunate that we had our partners with the Regional Health Authority that were open, you know, to embarking on this journey, that we would accept, first of all, the unified responsibility that we have to work together to ensure that the patients of the hospital would be given maximum support, you know, to help create greater support for their health and wellness. So I would suggest, you know, here that in responding to that question is that you have to put, you know, the First Peoples in a position of partnership minimum, that they be recognized for their autonomy, their independence in terms of being able to be a part of the decision-making process that concerns, you know, not only Indigenous people, but I would say everyone, that it's going to take leadership on both sides, you know, on the side of Indigenous people and certainly on the sides of Western approaches that are represented by regional health authorities or by the government themselves. It's going to take people that are willing to sit down and to engage in discussion based on values of respect, that we will be open, you know, to ensure that we can create a health system that is second to none. And here we have in our area with what we established in that partnership, you know, is our equal participation in that hospital that we refer to as Kigegamik. Translated, it means a place of healing. And we have had, you know, really very good support within the hospital itself with their administrators, and certainly at a higher level, that were very open to developing this relationship. And we find today that, you know, yes, we have a lot more work to do, but I think that we've made that step, you know, to gain that recognition that we must have and be in a position of equal partnership in the decision making in regards to, you know, how we see what could best support the health and wellness of our people. And certainly there is a lot of challenges. We recognize that, but the leadership is what is most important. And what really made the leadership or the the existence of Kigegamik was led by the knowledge keepers of our communities. We ensured that the local political authorities, through resolution, gave the full autonomy to the elders to lead the whole process, in that hospital, that we would have a strong voice. And we have people today that we have firsthand information, what is happening in the hospital. We're not getting secondhand. We're getting firsthand what is happening in the hospital in terms of the challenges. And what is so wonderful about our approach is that we're dealing with as partners, having a collective responsibility, to creating a better healthcare system. And part of the responsibility on our part, we felt, was to educate, the healthcare workers within that institution, to make them aware of who we are, why we think the way we do, and how we rely on traditional methods, to help in the healing process of our people. So I would encourage, for those that are listening across the country, to maybe come and visit us, and we would be more than willing to share. And I know that the local regional health authority here in this area have been very, very supportive, have been very cooperative in terms of our autonomy and independence, in ensuring that we have a much stronger voice. And to me, it's been my experience in my life that change will not happen through conflict. It will not happen through confrontation. It's going to happen through the hearts of people that are willing to have the courage to make the changes that are necessary. And we have those people, that have stepped forward here in this area. And I know that, we've set the stage, and maybe there's others across the country that have done similar things. And it is to the greater benefit, for those that are in need of full support for their wellness. Thank you. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Elder Corshane. So we have come to our wrap-up time, and it's kind of unfortunate because we still had a lot of wonderful questions, and I'm sure that people would have wanted to pursue the dialogue. But as noted in the chat, the Turtle Lodge has recorded this session and has recorded the questions, and will be following up as much as possible to respond to them and to continue to inform the dialogue going forward. I'd like to personally thank the knowledge keepers, the elders today, the grandmothers. I do want to thank the Turtle Lodge for the invitation to be part of this really incredibly inspiring webinar. And I have to say, it's wonderful to hear such positive messages and messages of hope. But as somebody who works in the federal government, it has not, I certainly recognize the incredible amount of work that is required to be able to move forward in a positive way and a path of forgiveness. And so I think you have inspired a lot of people who, in their own personal and professional lives, have a responsibility and a contribution that they can make. And from there, we can influence many others, both in institutional and non-institutional settings, in family and in community settings. So thank you so much for that. I also wanted to just put a placeholder that we will be having another national gathering on anti-Indigenous racism in the Canadian healthcare system on January the 27th and the 28th, 2 half-day sessions. We will be sharing more information about the agenda, but certainly our knowledge keepers today will be invited. And I do hope that many of you will be able to participate, observe, or contribute in a meaningful way towards preventing and eliminating anti-Indigenous racism in all settings across Turtle Island. And with that, I will turn it over to my wonderful co-moderator, Sabina.
Thank you, Val. And thank you to the knowledge keepers for inspiring us today with an approach that transcends politics. And even though racism is very much systemic, what you have shared inspires us that it will take individuals working from the heart to make the change that's required. And it's about values, it's about being kind, it's about teaching our children it's about forgiving and, and being forgiven, and I think that's such a profound teaching, and there are ways and means to move forward in that way. I found that, I hope we're all going to jump on board and support an initiative of taking the youth to the earth, to the land, in initiatives of earth stewardship that will basically teach the youth how to be kind. Because when you're close to the land, you learn how to be kind. I find that so profound, and I wanted to thank again all the knowledge keepers for your wisdom today. I think this is just a beginning of a process, and I hope that the country really gets the opportunity to continue to hear from you and to continue to be to engage with you, and to be, to work in partnership. So on that note, I want to ask Elder Dr. Dave Christian to provide us with some closing remarks and a blessing as we move forward in hope together. Thank you again.
Thank you very much to Sabina and Val for joining us here today and leading this initiative. I feel a deep sense of hope in witnessing, the participation of so many today. We were really overwhelmed to hear that so many people were showing interest in what the knowledge keepers were going to share today. And to me, that reflects, that spirit of openness that we, in order for us to be able to move forward, that we have to be able to be open to each other and be willing to share the knowledge that each of us have that can create a much better world. And I believe that today, we can step forward and see it as a good beginning, but recognizing that there's a lot of work that still has to be done. But in keeping with, the teachings of our people, that it will require a spirit of courage to be able to meet these challenges that are in front of us. A dream was shared with me last night, and in the dream, young people bought me 3 things at this gathering that was happening. And these 3 young people, they said, "We bring you these 3 things that will amount to a message." The message never really came within the dream itself. And I really reflected for a long time, what were these 3 things that the young people were bringing to me? And it dawned on me that so many times we speak negative of the young people. And even though that they face tremendous challenges, they're still beings that have so many gifts. And I began to realize what the young people were trying to tell me was that they were bringing their willingness to come out to support the dream of our ancestors, that we will find our way back home, that we will find our way back to the land. And what they were bringing in the dream was their strength, their courage, and their pride in who they are in spite of, the challenges that they have. And it is in this dream that I speak on behalf of the young people. Let us show, the maximum support for them, to help them to fulfill their dreams, creating a better world that we know that we all want, because it is the young people that are always reflect the future. And we have to do everything that is humanly possible to ensure that they're given maximum opportunity to learn, which was one of the reasons why we suggested, that there be these infrastructures in place of learning for the young people that are guided, led by the knowledge keepers in full autonomy and independence of the teachings that they hold. And one of the things that is very, very important in our protocols as a people is prayer, which I'm going to offer here as we bring it to a close. And it is always an honor and a privilege to be able to be asked to offer prayer to the Great Spirit. Because saying the prayer of gratitude invokes and has the power to invoke the Spirit to come within our presence so that we can be guided, inspired to fulfill acts of kindness that is inspired from the heart. And in keeping with that spirit is that we acknowledge the Great Spirit, but also acknowledging we haven't got the intellectual capacity to be able to understand the great mystery of the great Creator. The best we can do to know is to feel the Creator in our heart. That is why the land is so important, because we feel the fullness of the spirit of the love that has been manifested into the earth itself, but also been manifested in all of life, and certainly ourselves as human beings. And I give thanks to Mother Earth, for all that she gives us in order to, what we need to sustain us, the food, the water, the medicine, and certainly the teachings that we need in order to live and find a good life and live a good life. And also to the ancestors that sit in the four directions that represent the balance of life, that sit in the direction of the east, the south, the west, and the north, that have always been there to offer the guidance that we need to be inspired, to be able to do the things that we were destined to do as human beings. We are spiritual beings. And in closing, let me close with my language and say, miigwech mina kitigo kijemanito kinanako migo. Miigwech ke kitigo we miteake kinanako migo gegin. Kinagego jimis jang anin chon dadisiang. Wisine when the bimishkik yan boske is a knamaoyang. Anin gene went wechip mosyang maki. Miigwech gende naninako mak. Ke we no atso kanga na biat wabanong shawanong nigabianong hiet no ke we no egi bi jin Chicago ang nanong when again in the chico we in the mage ang one in the shanishnabe aning ge we ne join dagos at gain shnabe exkit to ke we chi kanama get anin mayat jini madiziam miigwech. Thank you very much.
And that's it for today, everyone. Thank you again. Thank you, Elder Krishane. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll see you again. Stay well, stay healthy.
Thank you, Sabina.
Thank you to all those who listened so respectfully and took our words to heart. It's appreciated by everybody. These are good words intended to help everyone. Wopidayamitakewas.
Walalia, Katherine. Walalia.
Yes, thank you to everyone, and to Valerie and Sabina and Dave, Katherine, Stephen. It's been an honor to be on this panel with you. Miigwech, Walalio, Manyala.
Walalia, Nin.